Hello people, Linker here with your endgame campaign hot takes and this furniture tier list required update. Considering the amount of changes in the last 2 months, this list is surprisingly decent, but many changes in the game obviously introduced many changes in priorities. So there's 3 things we need to do. First, I'll briefly explain the tier list and the format. Second, we'll go over the heroes, furniture, and rankings that were changed and buffed in viability since this list. And you should stay all the way to the end because in the end we'll go over some hot takes and placements for the recently introduced heroes like Ren. So let's talk about this format for a second. The tiers are basically 2 parts. You have the hero ranking and the furniture ranking. It's gonna be meta heroes hyphen good furniture, for example, or meta heroes hyphen average furniture, and so on. The only exception is niche carving. We only changed around the order because I think it's more readable this way. This way you can look at all meta heroes over here, all average heroes over here, and all underwhelming heroes in the last section. Second, about the recent changes, we have some resources to support these priority decisions. The endgame replay dataset informing these decisions, so they're more than just opinion, also forcing me to keep Peepa high even though I don't get the hype myself. And then we also have the ultimate tier list. Having all these heroes ranked in one resource really helped me out put a consistent line. That line is going to be 103 points for meta heroes and 37 for average heroes. And if you're unfamiliar with these rankings, definitely check out that video, link below. Basically, these are just hero power level ratings in the endgame campaign. So we probably have over 30 changes ahead of us, so let's just get into it. For the first set of changes, this is going to be hero movements. Heroes that changed the whole tier since this list was released. Those of you looking into Irons, don't worry, we'll obviously talk about that soon. But this section is only when a whole tier movement is necessary. Because most of these changes are irrelevant, we actually won't pull up most of the furniture stats very often unless they're absolutely needed. And starting with the hot take, we have Wukong. He goes down to average. Now the recent introductions in Alna and Salas gave him competition for his role very often. There's not many heroes that go into Tassie and Aaron like he does, but more heroes can substitute him than before. While he's definitely still a very strong hero on the very top of average, he warrants a drop. Both the 3 out of 9 and the 9 out of 9 will find a good slot in good for average. The reason they're the same rank is that we're now aware the 9 out of 9 is better than we thought, but still, the hero itself is just on the verge of the meta. Next, we need to talk about Ukyo. He goes down to underwhelming. A lot of heroes in this tier have potential, but sadly with no accuracy boost, there's just nothing to justify this placement. The 9 out of 9 is still his niche carry potential going good, and the 3 out of 9 is average but remains an average. So the 9 out of 9 will find itself in underwhelming for good, and the 3 out of 9 is gonna find itself in underwhelming average. We also know that Rain, who used to be useless, is now meta due to her furniture. The damage increase isn't only good against Idra, but also alongside Irons in campaign. The signature item plays a part in it, but the furniture change is what enables her the most. Both of these are actually gonna go up all the way to niche carving. Lucretia. Now before you get typing in the comments, this is 3 buffs ago. At the time she was almost at meta, now she's incredibly strong. The furniture was reworked too. The 3 out of 9 is average for meta, reducing the energy regeneration here. And now the 9 out of 9 is the part that enables her. This allows her to keep and stack the Hellfires, also disabling ultimates, granting her a slot in the very top tier. Lorsan. So after his short vacay in the lower tiers, we actually see him used in bursts much more. So yeah, with the new endgame replay dataset, we can confirm his placement is good. Obviously, the furniture doesn't have much to do with it. Still pretty bad, but the hero as a whole deserves this upper ranking. Skriath 9 out of 9 deserves a bump. Where is it? There we go. So the idea with Skriath 9 out of 9 is that he's above the cut for the meta. The movement speed buff isn't the haste buff, obviously, that would be broken. It's actual movement speed. But even in the burst that he's used, he can sometimes find utility, giving him a low slot in the precious average for meta tier. Cecilia. She barely moves down to underwhelming. Her win sets are falling out of grace. The 9 is mistranslated, as you know, giving her 2 blades on every ult, finding her slot in average furniture for underwhelming heroes. Reorganize. Now Lucius. The mitigation and dispel is cool. The heroes as a whole though, we warned the last one, if he won't be finding the usage, he will drop. He didn't find the usage, so now the drop hammer is pulling him down for average or underwhelming. All the way down, the issue is he brings a pretty unique mix to the table. But the Dispel is often outclassed by Fox Furniture, or the defense mitigations are often outclassed by Hendrik mitigations. While he's useful in tower and some clever players still find ways to use him very rarely, the unique mix he brings to the table is usually outclassed by many other heroes, which makes him harder to use. Theowyn, I mean, there's not much to talk about, sometimes with Flora, sometimes with Isol and Damon, sometimes in stall sets. Her immunity and heal counters are enough to pave her way to the bottom of the average tier. Now that the hero is average, the furniture itself gets a big movement because the furniture is not bad at all. So the 9 giving her healing takes a lot of investment running against average heroes. It's going to be average furniture, but the 3 as replaced over here is still awesome utility at little price, moving it all the way up to good. Now as for Numisu, I can't believe I did my boy like this, one of the OGs whose unique mix always finds a slot, whether it's on Gwyneth sets, even burst in the earlier metas, and now in certain Ein sets. The furniture making the old heal totem proc their abilities and even allies is useful, but the competition is stiff. Because of these, both of these good and underwhelming will find themselves in average for average. And next up, much in the same vein, we have Rosaline. Now Rosaline has to drop, she's not as good as replaced her. Her Gwyn set falls off, there's a lot of competition from stuff like Joker and Cassidy in it, and the furniture remains underwhelming, so the 9 and the 9 still bugged. Both of these go in underwhelming furniture for average heroes. Now one of these I believe will be valuable for many of you is going to be Sophia. She moves down. She's on the edge, but she's not a required meta hero. I know some will want to argue this is a hot take, but nope, it's not. Look, she's not irreplaceable in those burst set, and she's seeing so much competition from meta heroes like Lucretia, Thorath, or those like a Skriat and their likes. Because of this, she's good, but she's no longer irreplaceable. The new introductions like Ren offers an interesting alternative to alt-oriented Molly DPS, but some of you saw my 35-12 replay of her sidecarring. He's dropping for now, but don't sleep on this Phoenix. Both the furniture pieces are actually slow, the 3 out of 9 can rarely find use in bursts if the match goes long. This means it's actually average for average. However, as for the 9 out of 9, this just doesn't do enough since she's not used as a carry but rather mostly for the pyramid. With that investment and current usage, it has to go all the way down to underwhelming. We have one change and one mention left for the hero section. Like, subscribe, and consider joining the new channel membership to support me if you like this video and want to see more ahead of everybody else. So the change that we have left is going to be Odin. Odin got an awesome rework in every single regard except the furniture buff that he no longer has. It's not all set for Odin's furniture though. If you want to use him in Celos Graveborn with Thorin and others, hear this out. The 3 is now an energy recovery debuff with Portal Core in the rise. This deserves a good for average ranking, a whole tier up. Now the 9 is no longer the buff, despite the investment gives him more control, so it goes there too. Lastly, I want to mention Antandra's rework. The furniture wasn't changed much, and while the hero is better than she used to be, I believe the hype isn't real on this one. She remains in good for underwhelming. Now on to the next section, we have furniture reworks. Reworks is a funny name since Lilith almost exclusively always buffs things, but I digress. These furniture abilities were changed since this list was made, so we need to at least talk about them. The hottest one people always ask me about has to be Feral. Now, Feral, Sushi talked about it. I'll start with how I don't believe he moves. Many others mentioned the attack pace is slow, means the 3 out of 9 is good, but not good enough to push beyond good for average. Now the 9 out of 9 helps him stun lock amazing, but it's luxury. It takes investment, it can't fight in the upper echelons of the meta tier, which retains him ranking in meta for average. Pretty precious nonetheless. As for Mizaf, the old furniture was useless, the new one allows him to execute. That's cool into stuff like Zoroth and Brutus. This utility moves it up to average for meta heroes. The thing about it is that it overkills his own tankiness in the 9. The utility is nice on the 3, but the 9 out of 9 conditional follow-up is an overkill. If it healed allies it would be better, but it remains where it is for the investment point that it is currently at. Next, the Aziz change. The Aziz change was big. Let me talk to you about it quickly. It gives him the old 9 ability in the 3, and people always ask me, Linker, why is Aziz so squishy? Try playing with backline and frontline until you get at the feeble mind at the right time. If you have this ability, it's going to tank, and with this new change, it's going to tank like mad. And Aziz that doesn't die means a set you can consider one without any carry, bumping his 3-piece furniture all the way to the very top tier. The new 9 out of 9 is a bit of extra control, but that means a lot in god comp variants. Despite it, it takes too much investment to justify a bump all the way up over here. I want to quickly mention a couple of things. Athalia's change, it lets her ult for extra damage and effects on the 3. This happens every 15 seconds, that's awesome. It's not enough to push her all the way up, but nonetheless, watch out for Athalia's counter heal, especially where damage is relevant, but not enough to warrant a move up. The last change I want to talk about in this set of heroes goes to Casus. The rework, the 3 out of 9 typical Lilith squeeze maneuver gives him extra flexibility, however he remains where he is in the very top of underwhelming heroes. The 9 however though, now gives him an actual valuable buff, so it's no longer completely worthless. Moves up, it's not just flexibility value, but a cool buff you should read on if you actually use that hero. Now, I want to talk about 2 heroes that people keep talking about a lot. Rezo. Look, his furniture is fine, it's not offensive. Sure, the skeleton DPS is meaningful in Twisted Realm, but in campaign, he's still extremely niche as a hero. In some Isol Daemon sets into mages, but it's rarely seen any use and wasn't changed whatsoever, so he's still at the very bottom tier. Remember, for campaign, he's not worth building. He stays in that bottom slot, and even if he becomes the main carry in Twisted Realm, he isn't as flexible as some of the other ones that are worth more investment into, like Soros, Mortis, or Isold. On the other end, we have Talene. That 9 out of 9 does so much. Don't add me telling me to bump her down though. I know it's expensive. And believe me, I know there's other Godcom variant stuff like Ainz and Soros, Alna and Mortis, but even in the current support sets, the 9 out of 9 does too much. You don't even need to completely understand this next section. Just bear with me with the amount of things that the 9 ability does. Every 5 seconds, Talene gains a shield. That shield does extra damage in every basic and Phoenix form. She gets damage healing her injured allies, and then she summons a meteor, damaging enemies. After the meteor hits, she gets a portion of the damage back as health, which allows her to take more damage before dying so that she can heal more allies. All of this is compressed into one ability. Now, I know it's a little bit tricky to use, but come on, you can't possibly tell me if you know how to use this hero, there's no possible case to be made to make that bump down. And regardless, we're going to move up to some ranking updates. These are heroes that were rediscovered. There's not many changes here, reflecting on how good this tier list was when it was released. Let's get right onto it, hopefully getting your priorities sorted as accurately as possible. First, Ainz up. Like if you've seen the meta, there's no need to explain this, he's just incredibly prominent and so strong. Both pieces are required, that's that. Daemon 9 goes down. The thing is that Daemon, while he's an incredible hero, just usually does his own carry thing. The 9 is reliant on him actually dying to proc the effect, and while the extended one is pretty nice, you usually can proc it just with the 3, so there's no reason to go down the rabbit hole of that whole big investment. I love Daemon, believe me, but you can do with just the 3, it works wonderfully. The one thing people underestimate has to be the signature item 30. 413, and this hurts me to do, also moves down. Look, the hero, absolutely incredible. Signature item broken, single best thing in the game. He's very often used, but the signature item is the required part. The healing of the furniture is nice, and the fight does go on for long, but he doesn't give a fight to stuff like Zoroath, Daemon 3, and other things that you see over here. My mascot Arthos is incredible, but the 3 out of 9 is absolutely required. He can possibly stall with just his signature item, moving it down to average meta. Sadly falling out of grace, having some fights with stuff like Alna, still incredible if you know how to use him, but not as clear cut as it used to be in the very top tier. As for Zafriel 3, look, it is a short stun, but it can work, it can be used, move them up to average for meta. Zora 3, it's actually gonna change position, not move down, hear me out here, to niche carving for accuracy matter. Thanks to Rory for this one, it enables his burst usage. Don't get me wrong, still a definite top priority, I'm just saying it carves in the main usage. The 9 is reflective of the stall usage. The 9 is absolutely broken, but he doesn't get used like that at all, so it remains all the way down here. Look, the buff is absolutely huge, but the hero itself usually gets used in burst, so fights don't go on long enough. Drez. Look, Drez absolutely a niche, don't get me wrong over here. If you're running it, the 9 is probably the bigger part. Look, the attack speed increase and the duration are almost double, so if you use them, consider that. Moving it up to good for now, and definitely consider joining me over Twitch when we do these. The next placement is one we actually didn't sneak peek on Twitch. It's gonna be Isabella. Now Isabella, we actually have some of the data to talk about Isabella recently because we didn't have it earlier to kind of determine when she's viable. How is she viable? Look, it's a runner-up for the worst hero of the game, so not many people actually use it in the very end game, but we now know the 9 isn't the part that makes it viable. The 3 is the part that's required, making it do the void lightnings, the extra Peter's damage. If you actually end up using her, the 9 isn't that huge for it. It's a huge investment, probably not worth it anyway. So I'm pretty happy to make that bump down, even if CMW comes from my head for that. Quick mention goes actually to Mihira, who's way better than people give her. People tell me to bump it down. Doesn't make sense. The healing and energy on the furniture, people underestimate. Even if it's low, it's really good, especially in campaign where you need to maintain control. She converts that health to energy, so she has a lot of synergy in these stuff. If you invest in it, even the 9 is worth that slot in average for meta. And Nara 9 is another one I want to quickly talk about. It almost justifies a move up, but it seems like she's used for CC more often than she's used with damage in the very end game. Look, I want to bump it up. I want to see her do the carry sets. I want to see that happen. We don't see that happening enough. And now, onto the Neo Heroes, the part you've all been waiting for after many secrets, hot takes, changes, strategy talks, mistranslations. It's time to place them here. Starting with Mortis, his furniture is about carrying. Nobody uses him in PvE as a carry, so this is going to be an easy, underwhelming average placements. Next, we have Joker. So Joker is interesting one. Let me pull up a bunch of stuff. The 3 out of 9 is crucial for him, giving him the majority of the CC immunity he needs. However, the bonus is cumulative. It multiplies. As far as I understand it, not additive up to our testing. He's never completely immune. Look at that thing I just pulled up, but because in campaign you control the matchup so he's mostly immune, the 3 out of 9 belongs in good for average. The 9 out of 9, however, is a little more tricky than that. The bonus rarely ever procs because he doesn't get controlled if you actually orchestrate things in campaign. So as good as it is, it's a luxury that belongs in average for average. You have to know what you're doing to use it, and it does cost a lot to use. The same will go for Queen. The bonuses are clunky like herself as a whole. They can be viable. The attack boost is nice to have alongside the spiraling defense, and so is the healing, but they're not obvious to use, so I'm gonna be safe side on this one. Picking the safe side means both of these go to average for average, good bonuses, but just not obvious to use. As for Alna, the 3 out of 9 is mistranslated, giving 30 haste debuff for 5 seconds. It's good, giving her a nice average for meta slot. However, we need to talk about the 9 I just pulled up over here. The 9 is the broken part. The 9 gives her ally immunity. That's huge. You can do this with Lucretia, making her incredibly consistent, or virtually anything that makes him become much tankier. You name it. Aziz, Rowan, Damon, Isolde, most anything at all. So despite the price point, it belongs in the very top tier. So lastly, Kren. This is going to be an initial placement, but we know he does both DPS and support. We added this in the last moment, but both go in the same tier, so it's actually going to be fine. The support used with the bomb crit effects is pretty easy to use despite how the bonus itself isn't do or die. This doesn't help him carry, but it's nice nonetheless. It gives him a tentative slot in average for average, possibly enabling some fun sets. The 9 makes it a bigger bonus. But again, not the carry usage, not 100% of a big bonus, but an easy one to use if you do end up using Cram for support. People, this was big. I hope it helped you with your furniture priorities. Like and subscribe, join to support me and get the best content before everyone. And for now, I've been Linker. Peace.